Why, hello everyone, how are you doing this fine day? Hope you're enjoying your week. Welcome to another survival challenge. And you might be a little bit confused as to why you are looking on the screen right now and not seeing He-Man, despite the fact that this is a He-Man video. And the reason for that is, Mattel is a shit. Believe it or not, this is not my first He-Man video. On the last He-Man video I made, I had to release the video 4 times. Because every time I released it, they copyright struck my fucking video immediately. On the 4th time I released it, they waited like 6 hours and then they copyright struck my video. That's right, despite the fact that my video followed all the rules it was supposed to follow in terms of fair use, Mattel, the multi-billion-dollar company, thought it was important enough that they came in and stole the fucking money right out my goddamn pocket. And literally nothing I can do about it other than sit here and watch. These motherfuckers money cucked me. That is why for today's video, you get to enjoy the presence of Copyright Rambo. Because Rambo is a real fucking American who believes in truth, justice, and the American dream. God damn it! Fucking Mattel! What was I talking about? Right. We're gonna take a bunch of dudes and we're gonna throw them into the He-Man universe and see what happens. And if you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, and join the membership. Remember, if you join the membership, you get videos early. But I've wasted enough of your time. Let's get started. So I'm doing something a little differently today. Normally, since this is the 2nd time I've made a He-Man video, instead of just repeating all the He-Man information in the challenge, I would just send you to the first video to watch that so you can get all the information and then come back here so you don't have to see that information twice. But I'm not sending any more money to Mattel. So I'm just gonna take all of the He-Man information that was in that video and then basically copy and paste it into this video. So if you've already seen the first He-Man video, you're good. You could skip this section, just go to the Aku section after this and the timestamps. If you haven't, stick around and this is going to tell you everything you need to know about He-Man for the purposes of this challenge. Cool? Cool. But there is a bright side because I get to do one of my favorite things. Shit on Versus Battle Wiki. So let's go over to our good friends and find out exactly what they have to say. Of fucking course it's Multiversal Plus. Of course it is. Who isn't? And why is it multiversal? Because of the Star Seed? Are you serious? Versus Battle Week, can you at least make it difficult for me to make fun of you? Give me like some kind of challenge? I mean, fuck, this is starting to get boring. So just to clarify, the reason why Versus Battle Wiki is unbelievably wrong here is because the Star Seed is an artifact that is implied heavily to have created the entire multiverse of the Masters of the Universe, which is stated to be infinite. So obviously He-Man destroying the Star Seed proves that he is Multiversal Plus because that can produce Multiversal Plus levels of energy, and you get the idea. No, for a couple reasons. What evidence exists that the Star Seed has Multiversal Plus levels of durability? It's a little magical artifact that he smashes. What proof is there that it can withstand that amount of force? So even if it was true that something that contains a certain amount of energy has to have equivalent durability to the energy it produces, which by the way, it isn't necessarily, this is a magical artifact. It's not an energy source. It's not electricity or nuclear energy. It's fucking magic. Magic inherently breaks the laws of physics, of reality, of all that different kind of shit. How many movies and books and shows and cartoons and all sorts of forms of media have you seen where there's an all-powerful magical artifact that could fit in your fucking pocket and be smashed on the ground? How many times have you seen that? Probably countless, right? Because it's a magical artifact. There's no evidence that the artifact has to be of equivalent durability. Also, the whole story of the Star Seed is about Skeletor trying to acquire it so he can get this massively multiversal power and basically dominate the entire multiverse. At a point in that story, Skeletor gets it and He-Man gets it, and they both get massive power-ups. If both of them are already Multiversal Plus because they're capable of destroying the Star Seed, then what would be the fucking point of the story of them trying to acquire it the whole time? Clearly, they don't have that level of power without it. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been a plot point for them to acquire it. And lastly, He-Man has so many different continuities and versions of the story across all forms of media, from TV shows to web comics to regular comics. Even the action figures have their own lore that come with it in these little sort of mini books. And across all that media that's existed since 1983, the Starseed has appeared exactly once in one story, in one comic, and gets destroyed pretty much immediately after creation. Most continuities don't even have a fucking Starseed, and they don't explain how the multiverse was created. Most continuities don't even talk about a multiverse. So you scaling assholes are gonna hold the entire universe up to a single issue of a single comic and say that that is the power of He-Man and Skeletor and She-Ra and all these characters in a universe that has existed for over 40 years? You see, this is why people make fun of you guys. The thing that you claim to do and be awesome at, you fucking suck at it. You are truly atrocious. You all seem like a bunch of insecure children playing in a park, all arguing that your invisible space gun is the most powerful invisible space gun out of all the other little kids' invisible space guns. And then getting these long drawn out arguments about it over fucking nothing. It's fiction. That means not true. Stop embarrassing yourselves. So now that Versus Battle Wiki has been sufficiently bullied, how strong are we going to say that the He-Man universe is? And I mean, it's really fucking strong, guys. Like, it's okay if a universe just blows up a planet. That's fine. That's a perfectly reasonable power level. Not every single fictional universe has to be multiversal. There's a lot of good stories that aren't multiversal, you know? That 70s show, The Sopranos, Jerry Springer's Baggage, you know? All perfectly adequate television. So I'm not gonna list everything that exists within the He-Man universe because, oh my god, it is so much bigger than you could possibly imagine. It's massive. And it's kind of crazy because it's not Marvel, right? It's not like this massive multiverse, but I feel like it would take longer to explain. It's really only 2 planets, and both of these planets exist within the same solar system. That's it. There are other things in the universe outside of those planets, but they only become relevant once they land on one of these 2 planets. Outside of that, nothing fucking matters. But despite that, these planets have so much fucking shit on them. So the basics that everyone should basically know is that you have Eternia, which is one planet, and it's ruled by King Randor, and there's this interdimensional skull-faced sorcerer that comes to Eternia for the sole purpose of conquering it, and Prince Adam is chosen by this sorceress, known as the Sorceress, in order to become a hero to defend the planet of Eternia against the skull-faced sorcerer, and he becomes He-Man. And that's the story on a very, very basic level. That does not account for Preternia, Subternia, Etheria, all of the many different races. You know, there's a race of beings in He-Man that are literal meteors that turn into animals. Like, that's their whole thing. They're kind of like Transformers, but they turn from animals into meteors, and then they can fling themselves at things like meteors and cause meteor levels of damage. That's a whole race of beings. What crack addict came up with that fucking idea? Like, that's a nutty idea. There's a whole race of rock men. There's a fucking religious cult that's obsessed with turning themselves into robots. There's a group of alien invaders known as the Snake Men who serve this dark god who land on the planet to conquer Eternia, who's already conquered several galaxies that we never see, and he's ruled by King Hiss, and King Hiss is like this weird, like, amalgamation of man legs, but also a bunch of snake parts that come out of the waist. He uses all kinds of crazy dark magic and shit, but then there's also continuities where he's basically the DNA of all the greatest warriors in the universe all combined into one person and then turned into a snake for some reason. This shit is nuts. Like, it would take me an hour to go over everything that's just on Eternia, not including Etheria, which has She-Ra and Hordak, and that's a whole other can of worms. Can of beans? Can of, what's it saying? I don't know sayings. So instead of going over every single little thing that exists within this universe, I'm just gonna go over some of the major things and some of the biggest challenges that people are going to run into when they arrive. Biggest challenge, obviously, is going to be He-Man. He-Man is strong as shit. So He-Man's whole thing is that he's an unbelievably amazing warrior. That's one thing. Like, he's the greatest warrior to have ever lived. Another thing is his massive levels of strength. Like, he was able to push the moon out of orbit to alter the tides. He's been able to stop tornadoes by just gesturing towards them, and the physical strength causes massive whirlwinds that just eliminates the tornado from existence. He's fast as fuck, able to block lasers and react to shit that's being shot at him from space. He gets there in like the blink of an eye and he just dodges it like it's no big deal. But the most important thing, and the real reason why he just can't be defeated outside of his incredible strength, is the Sword of Power. Not only does it bestow his strength strength to him and allow him to bestow strength onto others, which is super useful that he doesn't use nearly as much as he probably should. It's also completely indestructible and completely negates any form of attack if he uses it to block. It doesn't matter what the attack is, whether it's physical, reality warping, magical, doesn't matter. If He-Man raises his sword and blocks the path of whatever the attack is, it's not going to get through the sword and actually affect He-Man at all. He can literally survive anything that's thrown at him as long as he blocks it with his sword, even things that are usually not blockable. So for instance, telekinesis. Like, let's say somebody wanted to like crush his heart, right? Now this wouldn't normally be a projectile and wouldn't normally need to pass through anything. But if he lifts his sword up in between where the telekinesis is coming from and his own body, it will negate the usage of that telekinesis. The Sword of Power is essentially the ultimate shield and ultimate sword rolled into one. And this sword and He-Man's ability to use it is pretty much the only thing that's kept Eternia from being completely fucking conquered by Skeletor. Because outside of that, Skeletor is the most powerful thing in the entirety of the He-Man universe by a massive margin. There are a ton of sorcerers in the He-Man universe. I mean, you have Hordak, you have the sorceress, you have a literal god who created the Sword of Power and Eternia and all of that, and none of them are shown to really come anywhere near Skeletor's magical ability. He is an interdimensional being that comes from another universe outside of the universe that Eternia is from, and because of that, he brings all sorts of forms of magic that just straight up don't exist in this universe. Basically, throughout all the different continuities with Skeletor, he can essentially do anything he wants to do. He can transform people into shit, he can control time, he can control space, he can create life by summoning creatures, not summoning them from another world, just straight up creating them from scratch. Like he has life creation. He created his own lair. He will create minions for himself that will serve him to their dying breath. If you can think of something that can be done with magic in fiction, chances are Skeletor has done it or can do it. People really don't give Skeletor enough credit, but he is one of the strongest sorcerers in fiction, just by the sheer variety of abilities that he has. And unlike a lot of sorcerers who require all kinds of different shit in order to do it, like they require artifacts and all that different kind of stuff, he doesn't need anything. He can do it with his bare hands, he can use his staff, or he doesn't have to use his staff. He just does things. The only thing that's really limiting him is the scale of his magic. His magic cannot affect entire multiverses without something to amplify his power. As far as what he can do within the range of power that he has, it's basically limitless. And this is a lot of the reason why He-Man is so fucking broken, because pretty much every single of these near limitless types of magic that he's used on He-Man, and He-Man has been able to in some way counter them. Because pretty much none of that shit can affect the Sword of Power. And even He-Man himself can generally overcome most of what Skeletor can do, even kinda without the sword. Like for instance, at one point Skeletor created a cage, and this cage was stated to be created out of a magical material that completely ignores any type of force applied to it. It's essentially an indestructible cage. No kinetic force, fire, lightning, magic, whatever you want to say. Nothing could affect this cage as far as Skeletor stated, and as far as a lot of the other characters who were locked in the cage stated. However, once He-Man was locked in the cage, he was still able to bend the bars and escape, while saying something along the lines of, "Nothing you can ever make will ever be able to hold me," something like that, to Skeletor. So what is this? Does this mean that He-Man has infinite strength? Well, that's definitely a possibility. I'm not going to jump to that conclusion. I think it's just as likely that He-Man is himself a magical being that is capable of essentially undoing magic with his bare hands. Magic by its very nature negates physics and reality, and He-Man is shown to be able to do things very similar to this. He-Man also has some very reality and physics breaking shit. It ain't just Skeletor. Also, before we continue, I should probably clear up that the pushing the moon out of orbit feat that He-Man has, it's a very casual feat, and characters who were shown to be weaker than him have significantly better feats than this. Like for instance, Skeletor, when he was forging his staff, he was smashing it with his hammer like you do when you forge shit, and every single time the hammer collided with his staff, it was stated that multiple planets were blowing up across the universe. We don't know how many. There's a panel in the comic that shows 4 planets blowing up with a single hammer strike, but it could be considerably more than this. And when these planets exploded, the the souls of all the people who died on these planets left the planet and were absorbed into the staff that he was creating. And even this is shown to be a pretty casual feat from Skeletor, as he wasn't actually trying to destroy planets, he was just forging a staff. When it comes to the He-Man universe, we have impressive feats, but we don't have a peak level, because pretty much all of the greatest feats are done relatively easily by all the characters. When it comes to the He-Man universe, we just don't have a maximum strength level for them. Then you go below that and you have characters like Evil Lyn, easily within the top 5 most powerful magic users in the entire universe, probably top 3 or 4 on Eternia. Then you have Beastman, who people really like to disrespect, and that's mainly because the cartoon always had him be a dumbass whose stupidity always fumbled Skeletor's plans and messed it up. But that's really mostly because it was a kid's cartoon, and there were a lot of little changes and edits that were made in that cartoon from the basic lore and story to make it appeal more to children. Beastman being a fucking dumbass being one of them, but if you read the comics and the mini comics and things like that, this isn't actually the case. I mean, he's a general to Skeletor's armies, and there's a reason for that. He's one of the best strategists in all of Eternia, and there's a reason why Skeletor trusts him to run that army. Not only is he a good strategist, but he's physically powerful enough to fight against He-Man. While clearly not being as strong as He-Man and pretty much always losing, he is capable of fighting against him. I mean, this dude can chuck mountains. He's a very powerful being because he himself is a master of the universe. And this is where I kind of have to get into this sort of master of the universe thing. The universe is always called Masters of the Universe, and the reason why that is because within Masters of the Universe, there are Masters of the Universe. And each of the Masters of the Universe has some sort of control over some aspect of the universe. And this gives each of these masters unbelievable power across the entire universe. Now, is it universal power? No, don't fucking flip your lid, okay? Scalers and Versus Battle Wiki, it's not all that. But it generally is very impressive levels of power. For instance, Beastman is the master of beasts. Any animal, monster, beast, dragon, whatever the fuck you want to call it, Beastman has complete control over them. Unlimited control across the entire universe. This is also why much of Skeletor's armies are monsters and beasts. Beastman is even shown being able to control monsters and beasts that are more powerful than him, and I'll get into that in a little bit. There's even one character in Masters of the Universe who he's a human, and he has the power to transform into a robot or a monster, and he has vastly different abilities depending on which one he's turned into. When he fights against Beastman, he cannot transform into a monster because Beastman has the power to control him if he does that. Despite the fact that this character is not actually a monster, but is a human that could transform into stuff and is an intelligent being with willpower and thoughts and all that different kind of stuff, it doesn't matter. Beastman controls all beasts. It is just a rule of the universe, and that is how all the Masters of the Universe work. Your willpower or ability to resist mind control is not relevant to this universe because it's not mind control. He is a master of a fundamental rule of the universe. There's also Mossman, who is considered the equal and opposite of Beastman. A lot of people like to argue that Mossman is the most powerful being in the entire universe. No, he is specifically stated multiple times to be the equal and opposite of Beastman. Their power levels are very comparable to one another. Mossman has the power over all nature and vegetation. He can create it, he can form from it, he's made out of it. He's basically a lesser version of Swamp Thing if you've ever read DC Comics or watched anything DC related that Swamp Thing's in. That's basically Mossman. And also, if you've seen Masters of the Universe Revelation, just ignore it. I know that Mossman dies in that series because Skeletor just sets him on fire and he burns alive. That's not possible in the Masters of the Universe lore. That show does not follow Masters of the Universe lore. In reality, if you were to burn Mossman, he would just appear somewhere else where there's vegetation. He will stay alive as long as there is vegetation in the world. Masters of the Universe Revelation claims to be a sequel to the original show, the Filmation show, but they're so unsimilar. There's no way it could possibly be a sequel. I mean, fuck, in Revelation, Subternia is turned into hell, basically. Subternia was never hell. It's just an underground tunnel system. It's like a massive city within the planet of Eternia. There's no connection to hell there. That's why it's called Subternia. Subterranean, underground. Doesn't even make sense to call hell Subternia, because it's not sub at that point, it's just another universe. They even put Scarecrow as the devil equivalent who rules over Scarecrow is not the devil. He's just a dude. How could anyone possibly believe that this is a sequel to the original series? They change everything. Then you have characters like Merman, who's the master of the ocean, and I mean, you know Aquaman, right? He's Aquaman. He can control all sea life, he can control water, He is physically, again, powerful enough to fight against He-Man. A lot of the Masters of the Universe are powerful enough to physically fight against He-Man. So pretty much any one of these motherfuckers are like moon-pushing levels of power. There's a whole race of dragons that live on Eternia that is stated to specifically be created so that He-Man has to overcome an enemy with his mind and not his physical ability, because he's not physically strong enough to fight against the leader dragon of this army. There's Fisto, who everyone makes fun of because his name is Fisto, and his power is that he has a big fist. But what people don't realize that in the lore, Fisto is stated to be the second strongest person in all of Eternia, only under He-Man. That means that all of these other characters who has control over the entire oceans, that could flood the world if they wanted to, or Beastman who controls all animals, all of these different characters come second to this dude who just punches people really hard. There's Man-at-Arms, who's a super genius who makes every single weapon that Eternia uses, from flying spacecrafts, these giant cannons that are on city walls, laser weapons, all sorts of different crazy things. And he himself, as the Master of Arms, has knowledge and ability to use any weapon in all of existence to its maximum performance level. Basically, if it is a weapon, this man can use it better than you. Thor can wield Mjolnir for tens of thousands of years straight and master the weapon beyond all others. And Master at Arms, the moment he touches that weapon and picks it up, he will instantly know how to use it better than Thor can, because he is the Master of Arms. And this is just kind of the way the universe works. All of these characters are just insanely powerful, earth-shattering beings with universal levels of power across whatever they are the master of. And the crazy part is, that's only one planet. That's Eternia. We haven't even gotten into Etheria yet, which we're gonna do right now. But don't worry, it's not like we're doubling the fucking power level of the series with Etheria. Etheria is a considerably weaker planet than Eternia. It's really not even that close. A lot of people assume that She-Ra is the same power level as He-Man. No, it's been confirmed on multiple occasions. He-Man is stronger. While She-Ra does have unique powers to herself that He-Man doesn't have, overall power level definitely goes to He-Man easily. But that doesn't mean that She-Ra is a slouch. I mean, she has pushed the moon just like He-Man has. So at bare minimum, she would also be at large planet level. And just before we move on, and you keep saying bullshit, the reason why pushing the moon out of orbit is large planet level is because you're fighting against the gravitational pull of Earth, and it requires large planet levels of force in order to fight that level of gravitational pull. Or at least that's what scalers calculate. I don't really do math. I'm just taking their word for it for the most part. So while she has been confirmed to be physically weaker than He-Man, and her weapon, unlike He-Man, doesn't have all of the crazy resistances and shit, she does have some cool abilities. Like, for instance, she has healing powers. She has the ability to heal people. Even if they're only like an inch away from death, she can heal them and bring them back from inevitable afterlife-ness. Her weapon, unlike He-Man, has like shape-shifting abilities where it can turn to all sorts of different weapons. It can be a rope, it can be a boomerang, it can be a sword, a spear, a shield, all sorts of different things. And while I don't believe it's as indestructible as the Sword of Power, the Sword of Protection, which is what hers is called, is basically indestructible. I don't think anything's ever happened to it that has shown me that it can be destroyed. It doesn't negate all forms of magic and power like the Sword of Power does, but I mean, it's called the Sword of Protection. Obviously, it is capable of protecting her. On top of that, she has like this flying unicorn mount she can fly around on and fight people. And you get the basic idea. She's this really powerful warrior chick with a lot of cool weapons and abilities. But one really dumb weakness, like she's got this gem that is essentially the source of her power. And if that gem is ever broken or destroyed anyway, she loses the ability to transform into She-Ra. Which, you know, kind of a big weakness. Like He-Man doesn't have a weakness like that. As long as he has the sword, he can transform into He-Man. Super simple, uncomplicated, and doesn't completely fuck him in the ass. She-Ra doesn't work that way. She's got this major weakness that her brother doesn't have. But it's also not really a stretch to say that unlike her brother He-Man, She-Ra is not the strongest person on the planet of Etheria. That would go to Hordak. And Hordak is often called the more successful Skeletor. Like Skeletor has his evil empire and his lair and everything, and he's constantly trying to take over Eternia and being stopped by He-Man. Etheria doesn't work that way. Hordak is an evil ruler over the planet of Etheria. He rules that shit. That's his shit. She-Ra is in control of a small rebellion that is constantly trying to take the planet back. It's basically a reverse of Eternia. Etheria is a planet where the villains already won. And he won long before She-Ra was ever even born. This is one of my many reasons as to why I say that Etheria is not really as strong as Eternia. In Eternia, Skeletor is like an extremely powerful being that could easily take over the planet anytime he wanted to. He just keeps running into He-Man. Skeletor is shown on more than one occasion
to be more powerful than Hordak, yet Hordak has successfully run Etheria for quite some time, and She-Ra has not been able to overthrow him in the many years she's been She-Ra. She just doesn't have that level of power. Personally, I believe if you swapped out She-Ra with He-Man, He-Man would overthrow Hordak pretty quickly, and Skeletor would essentially take over the planet and defeat She-Ra. The two planets just aren't at the same level. But that doesn't mean that Hordak's not powerful. While Hordak's magic ability is nowhere near Skeletor's, like this is shown pretty clearly in a lot of different media, Hordak also has a mastery over technology that Skeletor doesn't have. Skeletor doesn't fuck with like iPhones and shit. He doesn't do tech. He is a master of magic. Hordak is a master of both. To just give you an idea, if Skeletor had an S rank in magic, Hordak would have like a B+, A- rank in magic and technology. He is one of the best at both, but he doesn't excel beyond everybody. In fact, there are people that work under him that are actually better at technology and magic than he is. They just don't have both like he does, and he still is the most powerful person in Etheria. And another reason why you can tell pretty easily that Etheria is quite a bit weaker than Eternia is the villains. I mean, some of She-Ra's most dangerous villains are characters like Entrapta, who is a tech expert, which is good, but her power is that she has hair that can bind and constrain people that she controls. Not really to the same level as someone like Beastman, I don't think. Another villain she has is Catra, who is a woman who has feline-like abilities. She has razor-sharp claws, and she's really fast and agile and hard to hit, and that's it. She's just like a strong cat lady. I guess she's like Cheetah, the Wonder Woman villain, basically, but her name's Catra. I mean, you can see the difference here, right? The villains just aren't to the same level. For the longest time, Hordak was the main dude in Etheria. He was the big bad of the series, who, well, actually, Hordak isn't the ruler of the Horde. He's just a very high-level member, and the real leader is Horde Prime, who is this basically intergalactic warlord who's taking over the universe outside of the solar system of Eternia and Etheria. And he sent Hordak to take over this one solar system, but Hordak's been stuck on Etheria forever, being held off by the rebellion and not being able to continue its invasion. And this has pissed off Horde Prime considerably. And there's like this looming threat that Horde Prime will eventually come to Etheria himself when he's just tired of waiting for Hordak to actually take it over. This is a concept that a lot of people just straight up didn't like because they believe that it disrespected Hordak, as Hordak is now just a lackey to this guy Horde Prime. This doesn't actually bother me at all because the idea of Horde Prime is pretty cool. I like the idea that there's some like looming threat out there that's coming to take over that's way more powerful than anything we've ever seen before, and we've only seen just a small part of this Horde army. Like, this isn't all of it, this is just a little section. There's like this whole other thing out there. I think it's pretty cool. I can't really use Horde Prime in this challenge, mainly because we don't know anything about him or what he's capable of. Like, we know he's stronger than Hordak, so I could say that, and we know he has a massive army that's capable of taking over galaxies, not just this single solar system. But like, where does his power compare to, say, Skeletor? I don't know. But I am waiting for the day that Horde Prime shows up and we get to see a Skeletor Horde Prime face off. That'll be fucking cool. It's cool shit. Alright, so before we begin, a couple of arguments that I know are going to come up from He-Man fans that I'm just going to get out the way right now. First one being, some people who have seen the original He-Man cartoon may say that this is dumb because He-Man doesn't kill people. Like, he specifically goes out of his way to not harm any life. He respects and adores all life, even Skeletor's, and won't kill a single person. And there's even an episode in the original cartoon where he does believe he killed people due to an illusion that Skeletor made him see, and he like loses his shit and almost stops becoming He-Man because he just couldn't believe that he actually killed someone. So basically, how is he going to fight against these evil forces if he's not willing to kill anybody? And that's simple. That only existed in the original Filmation cartoon because it was made for children. When the cartoon originally came out, this rule didn't exist, and parents were kind of worried. So they changed it and tried to make it more kiddie and less dark. The comics have always kept the darkness a bit, and He-Man does indeed kill people. The lore has brought over the respect for life that the cartoon He-Man had. It's not like he absolutely refuses to kill people like he did in that original cartoon. If it really comes down to it, he will kill Skeletor. In fact, there have been certain continuities where he has. So I wouldn't worry about the whole no-kill rule thing. It was really just done because it was a 1980s children's cartoon, and there were very few things that were allowed to be shown in a child's cartoon. The general lore, he prefers not to kill people, but he does. So that's something you're worried about. Don't worry about it. It's not really going to come up in this video. Second argument I know I'm going to hear is crossovers. Simple. I don't utilize crossovers unless it feeds directly into the main lore. Crossovers, by their very nature, have both characters being completely
different power levels so that they can face off against each other. I know that He-Man beat Superman in a crossover. I know he one-shot the Flash. I know he's had several crossovers with DC and has matched those powerful beings of that universe. I don't care. I'm not using it. I'm only using feats that are canonical to Masters of the Universe. And lastly, yes, I'm aware that I am using He-Man and Skeletor in their base forms. I'm not using Master of Eternity He-Man or Master of Death Skeletor, who are considerably more powerful. If I did, the outcome of these challenges would be vastly different and these characters would stand virtually no chance. I mean, Master of Eternity He-Man has complete power over destiny, fate, and time. It's just not really a fair fight at that point. I'm using all these characters at their base strength levels. So if you think I'm severely underplaying these characters, just know this is their base form. All right? All right. And yeah, there's like a lot more I could talk about. Like, I haven't really talked about Scareglow, like the actual Scareglow in the lore. I haven't talked about Subternia. There's a ton of different races that exist that I haven't really talked about or gone into detail about. But I did discuss all of the major threats and the top tier shit that these conquerors are going to have to deal with. And I mean, really, ain't that enough? That's good, right? Yeah, that's good. Okay, so first things first. Usually these sort of challenges, I just take the character and I throw them in the world and see what happens. But I'm not doing that this time because it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, these are universal conquerors who conquer universes with like armies and technology and all different kinds of crazy shit. So just sending them down to the surface of the planet with nothing but their dicks in their hands wouldn't be a very good representation of their conquering ability. So no, all of these conquerors are going to get their armies, their ships, any generals or whatever they might have. They're going to get literally everything. It's going to be an entire invasion force coming upon this solar system with Eternia and Etheria to see exactly how they go about taking over this particular solar system. First up on the chopping block, we have Aku from Samurai Jack series. So this motherfucker easily holds the record for the most convoluted origin story of an evil entity in fiction ever. Originally, long time ago, we have no idea how long, probably before the existence of the planet Earth, there was a giant mass of blackness. Not like a black guy dog pile, but like a big sphere of shadow essence. It was like the source of all evil floating through space. And three different gods from three different mythologies, Odin, Ra, and Rama, all thought, you know what, we should probably stop that giant black mass of evil. So they came together to fight it, and it was this massive fight that was super hard, and they just barely overcame it, but eventually they did like blow it up and kill it in 1,000 little pieces. Anyway, one of those pieces flew away from the black mass. They didn't notice it got away from them, and it landed on Earth. It's also strongly implied that this black mass hitting Earth is what killed the dinosaurs. Except in this universe, it landed in Japan. And if you're a normal person, you might be thinking, oh, okay, so like that's a coup. Okay, got you. No, actually, that black mass turns into a big forest of evil death, and it just sort of starts spreading all across Japan, and anything that enters this black evil forest dies immediately, and this just kind of keeps spreading for millions and millions of years until Japan builds, and the whole country of Japan like exists now, because it didn't exist when the dinosaurs were there. And in Japan, there was this shogun guy, and he was like, hey, let's stop this evil forest that's been around forever because it just keeps spreading slowly. It's going to kill everybody in Japan. Now, I would argue that he probably should have left it alone because it's been growing for fucking millions of years. I mean, how fast is it spreading? It can't be that bad, but whatever, to each their own. So he goes out and he finds this monk. He's like, hey, monk, can you make something that helps me kill this forest? And the monk's like, sure, I can do that. So he gives him this poison that's going to help him kill the forest. And the shogun takes the poison and tips one of his arrows in it and shoots it into the center of the forest, thinking that it's going to kill the whole forest, but it doesn't. Instead, it gives the forest sentience. Okay. Why? That's gotta be the most impressive fuck up I've ever seen. This monk created a technology that created life. You could have given this shit to anything. Why? So Aku starts going around pushing everybody's shit in, and the shogun doesn't really like that, and he starts praying and being like, we can't stop this thing, none of our weapons are working, it seems to be completely immune to any form of damage. And then those three gods who fought the massive shadow space being thing, they all came together and like, okay, let's help these dudes out by creating a sword and giving it to the shogun guy and being like, okay, you little human dude, you go fight this shadow thing with a sword we made instead of us three who already fought the really big shadow thing. This is just a piece of it, but instead of us just coming in and immediately killing the fucking little thing and it being super easy. We're gonna send you in with a magic sword. That'll go great. But surprisingly, it actually does go relatively well. The Shogun does defeat Aku, but he doesn't kill him. He traps him in this sort of weird... He's basically like a tree again for some reason. He becomes harmless to anyone, and he stays that way for about 8 years. After 8 years, there's this big eclipse where the moon blocks the sun, and for some reason, that makes his tree form no longer viable, so he goes back to being Aku, and he's released again, okay? And the first thing he does is go to that Shogun who turned him into a fucking tree in the first place and attack his entire empire, kill everyone, including the Shogun himself. But the Shogun had a son, and the Shogun's wife was able to sneak the son out of the country before Aku took it all over and murdered everybody. So then the mother thought to herself, oh, well, I'm just a weak, shitty woman. I can't possibly fight against Aku. Let me train my 8-year-old son and put all this fucking pressure on his shoulders for him to eventually go and fight the giant demon thing that his father couldn't. That's good. Yeah, that's super great for this 8-year-old. His life will be awesome. And that's what she does. She brings him all around the world, having him be tutored and trained by all of the greatest warriors, including people like fucking Robin Hood for some reason. And he learns basically every style of martial art he possibly can in preparation to go on and fight Aku. And then from there, the story goes exactly how you think it's gonna go. He takes his father's magic sword, he goes to fight Aku, he wins, and then Aku opens up a portal, throwing him through the future thousands of years, so that he is now in a futuristic world, being an ancient samurai, in a world that is under control of Aku and is covered in a bunch of sci-fi alien shit. Yeah, exactly where you think the story would go. A lot of people complain that Samurai Jack's ending is weird, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Yeah, but I mean, neither is the beginning, so it's fine. In terms of Aku's character and motivation, just the things that drive him and the reason he does the things that he does is because he's evil. Basically, like, that's it. Like it's not just bad writing that he's just evil and just does things he's evil. In the story, he is the literal manifestation of pure evil given sentience. So he doesn't really need a reason for doing things. He kills people, he conquers shit, he enslaves people. He just does evil and spreads his evil because that is what he is. He is evil. He's actually very similar to Skeletor in that way. Skeletor doesn't really have motivation for what he does either because Skeletor is a manifestation of pure evil. Same thing. As far as powers and abilities go, he is the shape-shifting master of darkness. And when I say shape-shift, I don't mean like transform into different things. I mean he literally just shifts his shape. Like he still looks like Aku. He's just Aku in the shape of a crab or Aku in the shape of a fucking slug or something. I don't know. Whatever he wants to turn into. There was one episode in the show where he turned into a chick to seduce Jack, I guess. And Jack fell for it because he's stupid, but I don't think any child watched this episode and looked at this character and was like, yeah, that's clearly not Aku. That doesn't look anything like Aku. What are you talking about? It's gotta be the worst twist in cartoon history when this motherfucker turned out to be Aku. Like, yeah. Obviously. That's the main one he uses, but he actually does have a lot of other powers. And it would take me fucking forever to name them all, so I'm not gonna do that. But, you know, get fucking time manipulation, mind manipulation, darkness manipulation, fucking create pocket realities, and like just all kinds of shit. The problem is, he doesn't really use them in fights. Throughout the course of the show, he does all kinds of crazy magical bullshit, but whenever he gets into a fight with Jack, he just like turns into a giant fucking scorpion or something and tries to stab him. Like we saw this motherfucker when he was looking at Scaramouche. He just looked at Scaramouche and Scaramouche blew the fuck up just by being looked at by Aku. Why didn't Aku do that to Jack? You could have ended this shit a long fucking time ago. He just forgets he has these powers when he's fighting Jack. What? Why? I'm not gonna hold this against him. I'm still going to give him all of his crazy powers when he's in fights in this scenario, despite the fact he doesn't do them in his own fucking show. But again, not gonna go over all of them. Just know that his powers are random magical bullshit. He's a giant source of pure evil who is also a master sorcerer and can basically do whatever the plot wants him to do at any given time with his sorcery. So how would it go if the shape-shifting master of darkness landed in Eternia? I mean, in all honesty, he's only got one thing going for him, and that's that nobody in Eternia can really kill him. In his own series in Samurai Jack, there's only one thing in the entire universe that can kill him, and that is Jack's sword. And that is because Jack's sword was created for the sole purpose of destroying evil, and Aku is evil. As long as something is evil, the sword would be capable of destroying it regardless of any sort of strength or durability or damage negation that being may have. That's the whole power of the sword. That's why the sword is so valuable to Jack and everybody else. Now, I've heard people say things that contradict this, like the argument that the sword destroys Aku because it's magic and Aku is weak to magic, but that's not true because there's magic that exists in Samurai Jack that isn't Jack's sword, that doesn't do anything to Aku. Like, if it was just magic, then the Scotsman should be able to kill Aku because the Scotsman has a magic sword. Magic is about as common in Samurai Jack universe as Mattel copyright strikes are here. It is everywhere and unavoidable. I've also heard the argument that it's not just magic, but it's holy magic. Samurai Jack's sword is specifically using holy magic, and because Aku is a demon, that means that he is weak to holy magic. Again, this is something that there's really no evidence towards. The word holy is never once spoken across all of Samurai Jack. In fact, the three gods that come together to make Jack's sword come from three different mythologies where the concept of holy doesn't even really exist. Holy is really only a thing in Abrahamic religions for the most part. You'll see it in Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, but you won't see it in, say, Norse mythology. When Thor sends lightning down to Earth, it's not holy lightning, it's just regular lightning. It's only really Abrahamic religions where they'll say, you know, this water is holy and blessed by God, and it's somehow different than normal water. There are similar things in other mythologies. Norse mythology does have the eternal fire, but it's not holy. In fact, it's actually kind of the opposite, sort of demonic in a way. Doesn't matter. Point is, there's really no evidence that it's holy. It's really just that the sword was designed for this one particular purpose, and that's it. The sword's existence does not make Aku weak to something. It's just that the sword is strong against this thing. As far as the show tells us, Aku doesn't have any real weaknesses. And if we look on over to Eternia, there's really nothing that exists there that should be able to harm Aku. I mean, yes, He-Man does have a magical sword in the Sword of Power, but there is no creature that exists in He-Man that just can't be touched or affected in any way by any physical weapons. He-Man can walk up and punch basically everybody and do damage. And other characters who aren't magic can do the same. Teela can go punch Skeletor in the face. It won't do a whole lot, but she is still capable of hurting him if she hits hard enough. That's not really the case with Aku. So there's no reason to think that He-Man would have a weapon that would allow him to damage Aku that cannot be damaged by weapons, even weapons that are magical. This basically means that in the He-Man universe, Aku can't die. So does that mean that Aku is completely dominating Eternia? No. Because in literally every other category, he fucking sucks. He is not particularly intelligent or skilled in any way. In fact, the only reason why he's been able to take over the planet in the Samurai Jack universe is because no one can kill him, and he is vastly more powerful than everybody else. But if he was an Eternia, that wouldn't be the case. There is not a single Master of the Universe that exists within the world of Masters of the Universe that isn't vastly superior to him in physical power. Even Beastman is physically superior to him. In terms of physical skill, Aku has never once defeated anyone who is capable of harming him. He lost against Jack's dad the first fight. He only won the second fight because Jack's dad didn't have the sword, and he has literally never defeated Jack. At the end of season 5 of Samurai Jack, when Ashi, Aku's daughter, acquired his powers and they were on an equal playing field, she was about to whoop his ass too. This dude sucks at fighting. He's not good. He completely relies on the fact that he's more powerful than everyone around him. Again, something that won't work when he gets to Eternia, because he's gonna be weak as shit there. In terms of his intelligence, he's fucking dumb. When he first fought against Jack, Jack defeated him and nearly killed him. Aku's response to this was to open up a portal in time and send him thousands of years into the future where Aku ruled over the world. Now, I'm not even gonna touch on the fact that it was dumb for him to do. Like, if he could open up a portal to any time period he wanted to, why didn't he send him in the past, like where the dinosaurs were around, like before Aku ever arrived on Earth? And then Jack could have just died of natural causes. Or instead of sending him through time, he could just send him through space, like in outer space where he would die of suffocation or into the sun or some shit. Why would he send him thousands of years in the future? You're just prolonging your problem. But the absolute dumbest thing is that he had thousands upon thousands of years to prepare for this guy to show up and try to fight him, this guy who's already beaten him in the past, and he did absolutely nothing. He didn't learn any kind of fighting skills. He didn't try to increase his power in any way. He just chilled. He took over the planet and just chilled for thousands of years and just waited for his problem to show up. And he's so dumb that when Jack actually does show up thousands of years in the future, Aku forgot about him. Aku completely forgot about the only person in existence who could possibly kill him. And then after Jack arrived, Aku then spent the next 50 years trying to kill him and failing because the only thing he did was just keep sending more people after him again and again and again and again to fight him and overcome him via physical ability, which Jack has proved time and time again isn't going to work because Jack is the physically most skilled and powerful being other than Aku in this universe. This show has 5 seasons of television, And in all of those episodes, you could probably point out 2, maybe 3 times that he ever tried any other way of killing Jack other than just having people try to kill him. He has all these crazy magical powers of chucking people in other dimensions and just doing all kinds of shit. But when it comes to Jack specifically, he's just like, nah, I'm just gonna throw yet another mercenary at him and hope that that does the job. Aku doesn't even have a proper standing army or elite military force. His entire army is just robots, and literally everybody else he sends after Jack are mercenaries that he hires out that aren't actually loyal to him. You can count on one hand how many people in this series are actually loyal and subservient to him. Like Domingo is one of them, the dude who has the skulls and summons souls of the people he defeated. He was pretty loyal to him. But yeah, the vast majority are just mercenaries. He does eventually create an elite fighting force to go after Jack. They take the form of the Daughters of Aku, but that's 50 years after Jack showed up and started fucking with him. Aku had thousands of years to build a proper force to fight against Jack. All that time to prepare did nothing. Then Jack got there, still didn't do anything, waited 30 years because the Daughters of Aku were about 20 and they were raised from birth to do this. So he waited 30 years to finally attempt to create an elite fighting force. And when he did, he only made like 8 people. Why didn't he build a whole army of the Daughters of Aku? They almost beat Jack. They were like really good at actually fighting against Jack. It's a shame he didn't make more. This shit isn't even going to be close. In terms of physical power, he's worse. In terms of magical ability, he doesn't come anywhere near characters like Skeletor or Evil Lyn. In terms of intelligence, he's not as tactical as Man-at-Arms or Skeletor. And based on his strategies in the past, which is just go fucking ham on everyone around him, he's going to be instantly recognized as a threat the moment he appears in Eternia against both He-Man's side as well as Skeletor's side. It's like he won't even be smart enough to try and team up with Skeletor against Eternia, which may actually give him a chance, but Aku is way too egotistical to go underneath anybody, and Skeletor is never going to serve him. Why would he? He's vastly more powerful. What is most likely to happen here if Aku does go here is Skeletor or He-Man will use some kind of magic to seal or trap him in some sort of infinite prison, which is something that they do have the ability to do. I can actually see Skeletor trapping Aku and then using Aku's magic or power to amplify his own, which is something that Skeletor does quite often. Yes, because Skeletor actually does try to make himself stronger to overcome the obstacles that he has to go up against, unlike Aku, who's just fine being what he is. This is going to be a complete slaughter. The only possible ending for Aku here is imprisonment, or even worse, straight up slavery. Aku fucking loses, and he loses hard. Next up, we have the Flood from Halo. I was originally going to put Lord Zed from Power Rangers on here, but I felt he was a little too similar to some of the other characters I have, so I wanted to mix it up a bit, so I used the Flood instead. But if this video does really well and a lot of people watch it, I'll make a third one, and I will definitely put Lord Zed on the next one, because I think he fits thematically in this world really, really well, and I think it'd be cool to see him side by side with like Skeletor and He-Man. I just think it'd be cool. Okay, so the Flood is another kind of complicated origin. Basically, a long time ago, like before the existence of humanity and shit, there were the Precursors, and the Precursors ruled the entire universe. They just deemed themselves the leaders of the universe, basically. And because they were kind of full of themselves, they started making a bunch of other species all over the world and sort of guiding those species in the right directions, playing God and all that shit, you know, because that always goes awesome. And the 2 best species they made, or the ones that they deemed the best, were the humans and the Forerunners. And they decided, well, you know, all species come to an end, including us, so we need a successor. Someone who will replace us as the main best species in the universe that guides all the other species once we're gone, and we choose humanity. And the Forerunners is like, ha, no the fuck you don't, and then killed all of them. Well, almost all of them. Some of them survived, and they decided to save their lives by turning themselves into special secret space dust, with the intention that they would eventually turn that special secret space dust back into a regular person, like later down the line when the Forerunners stopped fucking with them. But that didn't happen because the space dust got kind of dirty, and then it started molding and forming into an infection that people were breathing in, and then those created the Flood. And the Flood are like a giant mutated zombie hive mind that can infect both biological creatures as well as technology and robots and AI and shit. And the more it spreads and the more people there are, the more intelligent it gets. Like if it's in one person, it's kind of mindless, but if it's in a billion people, it becomes a super genius and it starts calling itself a grave mind. It's basically just like one organism that seems like multiple, or it's just one massive organism that keeps spreading into like a sort of super zombie virus. That's the Flood. That's about as good of a description you're gonna get. So how would the Flood do if it arrived on Eternia? People aren't gonna like this because there's a lot of Halo fans, but the Flood's not gonna do very well. And it's really for one reason and one reason only. The Flood's not magic. It's all science-based. It's a biological and technological takeover virus thing. But magic doesn't exist in Halo. They have things that look like magic, but not just straight up magic. And magic is kind of like the kryptonite of science. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's gonna do pretty decent at first. Like when it comes in contact with normal people, it's gonna spread like crazy just like it does everywhere else. The problem is that there are certain characters it's gonna come up against that are just gonna instantly be able to obliterate it. Like, what's it gonna do to Skeletor? Or any mage for that matter? Skeletor can literally do anything with magic. What happens when the Flood shows up and he just turns them all into fucking chairs? They don't have anything against that. What if he decides to just mind control the shit out of them all, and now he has the Flood as his own weapon? And then if he wanted to, he could like magically enhance it, and then it would just be a tool for him to use against other people. And he is far from the only character who can do things like this. On the flip side, if you go over to He-Man's side, he can't be infected by fucking any normal sickness or even a super sickness. He's a magical being. He is completely immune to any normal physical or even magical ailments. There's a reason why Skeletor never just turned him into a fucking chair. The power of Grayskull protects him from things like that. If you want to beat He-Man in the He-Man universe, you have to beat him in a fucking sword fight, and nobody in the He-Man universe can do that, which is why Skeletor hasn't been able to beat him yet. Because none of his insane, near infinite magic ability does anything to him. Now, if you're a huge fan of He-Man and you're saying right now, well, actually, Rouga, He-Man has been turned into a zombie, so the Flood should be able to turn him into a zombie. I mean, yeah, he was, but you kind of have to pay attention as to how was he turned into a zombie. He willingly gave himself up to Hordak because Hordak was going to kill a bunch of innocent people, and then Hordak threw him into this big green slime pit thing, and as described in the lore, it infected He-Man's soul with malicious intent. That's the zombie apocalypse in the He-Man universe. It's not a biological sickness. It literally fucks with your soul. And then after it happened, he was a zombie for like 5 minutes, and then they cured him completely with the Sunstone, because the Sunstone is also just some magical bullshit that could do whatever the story wants it to do, so it could completely fix fucking soul infections. I mean, fuck, if He-Man really wanted to, he could take the Sunstone and just cure all of the Flood. Turn all of the people who have become Flood into normal people again. Because that's the kind of shit the Sunstone can do. Without the Flood having any form of magic, I just don't see how they can do a whole lot in the He-Man universe. It would have to be some kind of infection or corruption that is magical in nature. More like the Doom demonic corruption. Oh shit, you know what? That would actually be another really good one to throw in here. Man, if I make a third He-Man video, I'm gonna have some cool fucking picks. I hope this video does well. Next up, we have him from Powerpuff Girls. And there's really no origin to go over here because him doesn't really have an origin. We know virtually nothing about this motherfucker. We don't even know his name. Him is not his name. Him just stands for His Infernal Majesty, and he's never said his name, because if anyone does say his name, everyone who hears it goes mad and dies. Yeah. Him and Aku are similar in a lot of ways, except him is better in pretty much every single way you can be. Other than the fact that Aku can't be damaged by normal means, and him can, like you can punch him in the face if you hit hard enough. That's really the only place where Aku's better. In every other aspect, him is so much better than Aku, it's not even fucking close. Also, I'm beginning to realize that I just chose 2 Cartoon Network villains to be on this list. I usually like to keep the list a little more varied than this. I didn't mean to do that. I just picked characters at random. Probably should have planned that out a little bit more. Whatever, it's fine. I'm not changing it now. In terms of his powers and abilities, he's the same as a lot of other characters that I have on this list, where their power is just random magical bullshit. Whatever the fucking plot wants him to do, he can do. It's just magic. So much like Aku and Skeletor, he can just do whatever. The difference between someone like him and Aku is how he actually uses it. Well, for one, the magic he uses is far more potent. Like at one point he used telekinesis to move the fucking sun. Just sent it moving away from him through space, like a whole fucking star. That right there makes him vastly more powerful than anything Aku has ever done. But even outside of that, he's just a smarter, more competent, better villain than Aku. Like I said before, Aku has all these crazy powers, but he usually just fights them normally. And when it comes to trying to take out Jack, he just keeps sending the same fucking things after him again and again and again, hoping that it's gonna change, but it's not. Jack's gonna keep beating them all. Him doesn't really do that. In fact, the most dangerous thing about him is not his crazy magical power, it's his patience. This dude is super, super patient. Him is a really interesting character because he's the only world-conquering force that I've ever seen in anything, where over the course of his story, he never actually attempts to conquer the world. Well, he does once, but it's in an alternate future where the Powerpuff Girls aren't there. But basically, the defining feature of him is that he wants to take over the world, but he's not going to attempt to do it as long as the Powerpuff Girls are there, because he knows that it's just going to be too difficult and not worth it. He knows the Powerpuff Girls can beat his ass, because while he has all of this crazy magical ability,
physically he's not as strong as the Powerpuff Girls. So he just doesn't deal with them. He just waits. The whole show of Powerpuff Girls is just him waiting for them to inevitably be defeated by somebody else so that he can then come in and take over the entire planet. Now, he is shown a couple of times to get impatient and try to do it himself. There's actually an episode where it specifically shows him, just like in hell or wherever his alternate universe is, watching the Powerpuff Girls beat villain after villain after villain, not even coming close to losing. And he gets kind of frustrated. He's like, all right, let me try and deal with this. Then he resurrects the Rowdy Rough Boys, sends them in, they get their ass beat, and he's like, ah, fuck, okay, well, I guess we're back to waiting. But even despite that, he's still super fucking patient. For the most part, he just chills in his other domain and then fucks with them in different ways. Like, he just alters reality, or fucks with them while they're dreaming, giving them these crazy nightmares, locking them in this weird dream dimension. Like, he just keeps fucking with them, but he doesn't actually go over for the sole purpose of killing them. He just sort of lets other people do that for him, because he knows that it really doesn't matter. Eventually, he's going to take over the world once they're gone. In his mind, it's just a matter of time before they are. Like, if you swap him out with a coup and have him be up against Samurai Jack and all that, he wouldn't have tossed him into the fucking future to deal with later. He just would have kept mentally fucking with Jack his entire life and waiting for him to slowly die. And then once he was dead, he'd just steal the sword and then take over the world. There's no rush. Why would there be? He's immortal. He'll live forever. Knowing this information and watching Powerpuff Girls is fucking horrifying. Like, unless the Powerpuff Girls are immortal or have kids that also inherit their superpowers, him's takeover of the world is inevitable. You can't stop it. I mean, shit, in the episode where the Powerpuff Girls go into the future on accident and him does take over the world, they don't go that far into the future. It's not like it's 20, 30 years. We see all the characters. They all look exactly the same as they did when they left. They went like 5 years in the future, absolute maximum, and this motherfucker wasted no time in taking everything over. So how would him do if he arrived in Eternia? Well, physically he's fucked. He's just significantly weaker than any of the characters here, even the weaker characters. Yes, him's magic is impressive and his ability to move the sun is impressive, but physically he constantly gets his ass beat by the Powerpuff Girls, and they're nowhere near the strength of someone like He-Man or even Skeletor. So that's not going to work. He's really going to have to rely on his magic. And in terms of his magic, it's not super impressive. Like, there is stuff that he has that's cool. Like, he has this thing called the Hate Plague, which is a gas that he spreads across the entirety of Townsville, and everybody who breathes it in begins to hate the things that they love, and they attack it. So everyone loves the Powerpuff Girls, so everyone starts attacking the Powerpuff Girls. If he did that across Eternia, that'd be really interesting, because everybody would turn on He-Man, because He-Man is the hero that everybody loves, and He-Man would basically have to fight against a bunch of innocent people. Now, the Hate Plague wouldn't affect him, but it would affect everybody else in Eternia, so that would be like an issue. But I still think that would probably lead to them using the Sunstone to cure everybody, making the attempt a complete failure. Outside of that, him can only really fuck with people. And he won't be able to just wait it out like he did with the Powerpuff Girls, because there's nothing to wait out. If he wants to take over the world, he's going to have to beat Skeletor, because Skeletor is immortal and also wants to take over the world. He would also have to beat He-Man, but he would have to beat him permanently. Because if Adam, the guy who turns into He-Man, dies, the He-Man powers just get passed down to somebody else. These are problems that aren't going to go away. As useful as his patience is in Powerpuff Girls, it kind of isn't here, at least to a certain extent. However, him is very intelligent. I think he knows that his best bet is probably to team up with Skeletor, which is likely what he's going to do. Now, the problem with that is that Skeletor will not team up with him on equal terms, because Skeletor is far more powerful. Not only physically, but also his magic is just way more impressive. So if him's going to join Skeletor, he's going to join as an underling, which him will not be happy about. But it doesn't really matter how him feels about it, because there's not really going to be anything you can do about it. This is not a Thanos situation. If you saw my previous He-Man video, I had Thanos in there, and I talked about how Thanos and Skeletor would likely team up against He-Man and overcome He-Man and basically take over Eternia. But both of those characters would know that the other one will likely turn on them at some point, and then once Eternia is taken over, it's just going to become a let the best man win sort of situation. Because Thanos actually has the physical and mental ability to overtake Skeletor. They're actually very comparable, so it would be kind of an interesting scenario to have. This is not the case for him. Him is not powerful enough to team up with Skeletor. He is only strong enough to work under Skeletor, and once they take over Eternia, if they ever do, I don't think him is going to be the factor that would push that over the edge to allow Skeletor to take over Eternia. But if they ever do, him's not going to be able to take it from Skeletor. And Skeletor has absolutely no issues with having people working for him who fucking hate him and want to kill him. In fact, Evil Lyn does. Evil Lyn openly tells Skeletor that she can't stand him, she wants to kill him, and she wants Eternia for herself. But Skeletor just doesn't care, because Evil Lyn is very useful to him, and he knows there's not a whole lot she can do about it. He's like, yeah, it's fine, you can hate me all you want, just do your job and we'll be good. It's sort of going to be the same thing with him. Him is going to join because he has nowhere else to go and no choice but to do so unless he's going to be wiped out by either him or He-Man's side. And he's going to absolutely despise that he has to work for this guy he doesn't like. He might even openly tell him how much he despises him. And Skeletor's going to be like, yeah, it's fine. Okay, cool. Just do your job. I don't care. That situation actually describes a shocking number of Skeletor's underlings. And yes, that is exactly the boat that him will be sailing in. Last up, but certainly not least, we have Armstrong from Marvel Comics. If this video gets 100,000 views, maybe 50 of those people actually know who this motherfucker is. Nobody has heard of Armstrong. And he's honestly the main reason why I wanted to make this video, because I thought of how cool it would be if Armstrong showed up in it, and that's it. The other three are just kind of an excuse. I have a massive soft spot for this character, despite the fact that he's only appeared in comics maybe 3 times that I can think of. I don't think he has an animated or live action depiction of him. He has appeared so few times in media that I can't even fill this section with images of him from comics. There wouldn't be enough. I really like this guy. Like, if I made a top 10 list of best Marvel villains, he might actually be on it. He wouldn't be top 3 or anything, but he'd probably make the list. All right, well, let me explain him a bit. Armstrong was born to the Trojan Empire. Yeah, Trojan, like Troy and Trojan fused. I know, it's dumb. Well, this poorly named empire that he was born into was in a downward spiral. Its people were dying, they couldn't feed themselves, their money wasn't worth anything. It was an empire on the verge of collapse, very much like the Roman Empire in its last days of existence. So Armstrong did the only thing he could think to do to save his people, which is basically to take up arms and become galactic conquerors. So they started jumping from planet to planet, stealing resources, killing people, taking land, and expanding the empire. Now, this is something that Armstrong didn't actually want to do. He just kind of did it out of a necessity. Now, is it possible that he could have done something else? Sure. But the point is that he is a warlord that never really wanted to be a warlord. He was sort of born into this role. So cut to many, many, many years later, and he has this massive empire that he rules over with an iron fist. He eventually falls in love and gets married, and his wife gets pregnant with twins. He's off campaigning, and his wife goes into labor. She dies in childbirth, and he has 2 twin sons who survive that childbirth. Armstrong hears about this, and it completely fucking breaks him. The only person he's ever loved is now dead, and he's so distraught that he can't even look at his sons. He doesn't really want to have anything to do with them. So he just sort of keeps campaigning and kind of just ignores them entirely for literally their entire lives. This gives both the sons a pretty bad daddy complex, and they are constantly fighting to try and get their dad's approval so that he will pay attention to them. And this keeps going all the way into their adulthood. Eventually, this causes one of his sons to die in combat when he tries to take over a planet that he probably shouldn't have tried to take over. So now Armstrong only has one son. The other son, named Trauma, not spelt like trauma, it's like T-R-A-M, yeah. This whole subsection of the Marvel Universe really likes wordplay, and they're not very good at it. Anyway, Trauma falls in love with the woman that killed his brother and Armstrong's son, and asks Armstrong if he can have his blessing to marry this woman. Armstrong looks at his son like he's a fucking idiot. He's like, you killed your brother, what's wrong with you? Fine, whatever, you have my blessing, go ahead. So Trauma goes to marry this woman. However, the woman isn't in love with Trauma, so Trauma abducts her and then goes to have the wedding, against her will, and then a bunch of her friends, including one of those people being the Hulk, show up to fuck up Trauma and get her back. This causes a massive fight that ends in the mortal wounding of Trauma. Armstrong is there at the wedding and holds his son as he lay dying in his arms. Before his son dies, he asks Armstrong, please don't do anything to these people, because he still loves that woman and he doesn't want to hurt her or any of her friends. Armstrong agrees, and as his son dies, it's the first time he actually looked at his son and held him and treated him like an actual son, and Armstrong realized how much of a fool he had been and how he should have been paying attention to his sons the whole time. Now his entire family is dead, and both of his sons died due to his neglect. Armstrong then spends an absurd amount of time and money trying to figure out a way to bring his son back from the dead and basically fix the issue that he caused. He eventually succeeds in building a machine that could bring him back from the dead, but it requires an absurd amount of power to use. And the only place that he knows that has that power is the Hulk, because he fought the Hulk before and he realized how much energy the Hulk had. So he goes off to find the Hulk and actually asks him relatively reasonably, hey Hulk, can you please power this machine so I can bring my son back to life? Because I regret the way I treated him and I want to have a good relationship with my son. And the Hulk agrees. So they go to bring his son back to life, and then the Hulk tricks Armstrong and purposely overpowers the machine, causing it to explode, not only blowing up the machine, but also completely incinerating Trauma's body, who is inside the machine, ensuring that Armstrong can never actually bring him back to life, and this super pisses off Armstrong. From that point on, he swears that he's going to find and kill Hulk for permanently taking that opportunity away from him. Then we go a little farther down the timeline, and Armstrong shows up to take revenge on Hulk and the Hulk family, shows up with this giant warship and attacks the Hulk. This leads to a massive, really badass fight where Hulk, in order to overcome Armstrong, has to go in World Breaker Hulk form, which is very important to note because, okay, so I'm not fully caught up with Marvel Comics. I haven't read anything past the Immortal Hulk storyline, but from World War Hulk, where we're introduced to the World Breaker form, all the way to the Immortal Hulk storyline, Hulk is only physically pushed into World Breaker Hulk one time by one person, and that is Armstrong. If you're thinking that he went World Breaker against Sentry during the World War Hulk storyline, you didn't fucking read it. Because no, he didn't. Hulk beat Sentry, Sentry passed out, Hulk turned back into Banner, and then went World War Hulk when Meek told him that it was his fault that his family died. It was the realization that his friend Meek betrayed him, and it actually wasn't the Avengers that killed his family, but him, that made him go into World War Hulk, not the fight with Sentry. Up to Immortal Hulk, only one person actually pushed him into that, and that is Armstrong. So yeah, I really like Armstrong. I know he's this world-conquering warlord type character, but he doesn't really fit in that category. He's far more complicated than a lot of those types of characters are. He was sort of kind of forced in this position, but he also made a lot of really poor decisions on his way through this decision, and he feels a lot of regret for the decisions that he made, and it's just interesting. Like, was Hulk right in destroying Trauma's body? Probably. Trauma was a world-ending threat who had kidnapped a woman to force her into marriage, but at the same time, after he lost, he made his dad promise to not try to attack them because in his mind, he really did love her, which is kind of a bit of goodness coming from this really evil dude. And Armstrong, despite the fact that he was enraged by the fact that his son died, honored his son's wishes by allowing them to leave, even to the point that when he needed Hulk's energy to bring his son back to life, he didn't attack Hulk because he was still listening to his son's last wish and went and asked nicely. This is a cool character, man. Oh, and also he's strong as shit. So the Trojans have the natural ability to channel energy through their bodies, but Armstrong is like the best person ever at doing that. He can absorb basically any form of energy. And then he developed this cannon that he puts over his arm that he then converts that energy into power for that cannon. And then he just fires that cannon and does massive fucking damage based on whatever energy he absorbs. The energy also makes him physically stronger and faster and more durable and all that. Armstrong is shown to be consistently more powerful than Silver Surfer and most versions of Hulk. As I said before, Hulk was forced to go into World Breaker just to overcome him. It's also important to note that his energy channeling abilities work on every single form of energy. He can do it to magic, he can do it to gamma radiation, he can do it to the power cosmic with Silver Surfer, literally anything. Also, the energy that his cannon shoots out is not the same energy that he uses to power it. So it's not like he absorbs the gamma energy from Hulk and then fires out gamma energy, because if he did that, he would just empower the Hulk. The cannon will actually convert the energy into a different form of energy that can hurt the thing he's fighting. It works the exact same way when he fights Silver Surfer. It doesn't take the power cosmic and then shoot out the power cosmic. It takes the power cosmic and shoots it out into something else that will harm Silver Surfer. This is a very, very simple power that is fucking broken when fighting against the right characters. And I kind of think that the He-Man universe is the right characters. I think Armstrong's probably going to do really fucking well here. For one, physically, he should be able to match most of these characters in a fight, if not be superior, since he's capable of fist fighting the Hulk, even without any energy absorption. But the main thing that the He-Man universe is going to have issues with is that all of the most powerful characters acquire their energy from a source. He-Man is a magical being that gets all of his power from the magic of the Sword of Power. Skeletor is one of the universe's most powerful sorcerers, but he gets his power through magical items that he crafts for himself. He crafted his staff, and that is what he utilizes to use most of his magic. With Armstrong here, he could just take all the fucking magical energies out of all of those items and empower himself with it. He could go up to He-Man, steal all of He-Man's magic, turn He-Man back into Adam, and then fucking one-shot him and kill him. Now, some people who see my first He-Man video might be a little bit confused by this, because I said that Thanos would have a seriously hard time here. Like, him and Skeletor are kind of equivalent in intelligence and ability, so I must be saying that Armstrong is stronger than Thanos. No, I'm not. I think Thanos would absolutely whoop Armstrong's ass, because Thanos doesn't draw his power from any source, so the energy channeling abilities of Armstrong won't do anything to him. So they'll just have to fight in a fist fight. Armstrong is really good against certain enemies. I don't think Armstrong is stronger than Superman, but Armstrong can literally rip all of the solar energy out of his body and depower him to the point that he's basically a man and then one-shot him. He's basically a kryptonite to any character who gets their power from any form of energy source. And before all the Superman wankers come out and say that that wouldn't work against Superman, yes it would. He literally just got depowered last year in Absolute Superman. He's been depowered like 5 or 6 times that same way. If you remove the solar energy from his cells, he loses all his fucking powers. That happens all the time. So yes, absolutely, Armstrong would beat Superman, even though he's not as strong as Superman. So how this is actually going to go down is pretty interesting, because as I said, Armstrong isn't like your normal conqueror. He's not going to come down super evil, being all sadistic, blowing shit up, killing people. He's not doing this because he just wants power and because it's awesome. He started doing it because he had to for the survival of his people. But then as time went by and he no longer had to do it, he just kind of kept doing it. But we see constantly throughout his stories that he's not sadistic. So I don't see him coming down, slaughtering a bunch of people and just taking over shit and just like being a dick. Like, I mean, he will, but he'll do it more so like it's a job. Like, I feel like he would show up, maybe blow up a couple of things, be like, okay, this is me, this is my power, give up, you know, I'm gonna take over your fucking planet. Obviously, Attorney is not gonna like that. Obviously, Skeletor and them's not gonna like that. They're gonna go to war, and they're gonna be very, very surprised when they realize that every single member of this race can absorb powers, and Armstrong in particular can absorb basically everything, and they're gonna start stripping everything of its magic. I mean, can you imagine if Armstrong comes into contact with Castle Grayskull and just absorbs all of the magic of Castle Grayskull? That is multiversal level power. Armstrong will be the most powerful character in this universe very quickly if it comes down to a serious fight. But in the end, Armstrong will come down. He will be very reasonable for a conqueror, but he's not going to be able to be talked out of his conquering, and he's never going to be able to talk He-Man or Skeletor into surrendering. So it's still going to be a war. It's just going to be a war that's not quite as vicious on both sides as it normally would be. It's really going to be more like a chess match to him, where he just has to overcome them without really getting too emotionally tied into the situation. You know, I think He-Man's going to get emotionally tied into the situation because it's his planet that's about to be fucking taken over. But for Armstrong, it's just going to be like a job. And it is a job he will most likely succeed in. And that's going to be all from me. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, and join the membership. Remember to join the membership. You get videos early. And always remember, y'all stay safe out there, you hear?